This is from Whispers from Eternity by Paramhansa Yogananda. This is Demand for Prosperity. Thou art my Father, I am thy child. Thou art the Supreme Spirit, I am made in thine image. Thou art the Father, owner of the whole universe. I, good or naughty, am thy child, and when I behave, I have the right of possession over all that is thine. Alas, I have played truant, wandering away from thy home of cosmic plenty. Lead me home again. Teach me to identify my highest interests with thy will. Rescue me from this shipwreck on the tiny island of my body. Expand my consciousness. Help me to understand once more that I am made in thy image. When, by thy grace, I discover that I, like thee, am omnipresent, then at last shall I have true dominion over all things, even as thou hast. I wanted to share something today from the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. We often read the parallel commentaries from the Bible and the Gita, and this is a practice started by a master who learned it from Sri Yukteswar, who learned it from Lahiri Mahashaya, who was also learned it from Babaji. This has been a whole thread throughout our whole work, our spiritual family, our line of gurus. And one of the great advantages of learning about these commentaries on the Bible and the Gita is they help us to understand the scriptures rightly. We may have had exposure to the scriptures previously in a way that was maybe not as inspiring to us, or in a way we didn't fully understand, or even in a way that may have been hurtful. That was certainly my experience to some extent. Let's just say it made the scripture non-attractive. And what we find, though, is that whatever scripture you didn't grow up with sometimes can be more attractive because you don't have any history with it. You don't have any baggage. So anything you hear, wonderful. Especially if you hear it right for the first time. Then if later somebody says something weird and contractive and my scripture is the best, you sort of say, well, that's not how I understand it. But if that's all you ever have heard, then sometimes it can be displeasing. And if not, that sometimes happens with some scriptures. But the thing is that what we found to our surprise is that some people were not completely passionately in love with the Gita. I found this out in Kerala when I fell asleep on the porch reading the Gita, and my cousin came and said, "What are you reading that's put you to sleep?" "Oh, it's the Gita." "No wonder." Now we can be shocked, but the fact is, have you perhaps not wondered the same thing? That by the time you get to Yuyutsu and Drishtadyumna and so on, it's just kind of, I'm gone too. You see, even Master said that his mother disciplined them by quoting from the scripture. Basically, this is what Rama did and you better be like him. And so he said we had our first bitter taste experience or exposure to the scriptures, that bittersweet. But what we found, again to our surprise, is that some people were even feeling intimidated by the Gita. Would it even be possible for me to understand the Gita? Some of them have said. And I mean, I can understand that if you wandered into a partial derivatives lecture as applied to vector calculus, and you found it a little bit tricky to follow, that then the next time someone says, "Hey, do you want to chat about vector calculus and partial derivatives?" you might say, I don't know if I can follow all that. But the Gita was written for you. The Gita is more basic than even mathematics, arithmetic, plus and minus. And so it is written for the common person. And by the common person, I don't mean the dull person. We are all the common people. The only uncommon people are the masters. And so anybody who brags about being a little less common than you, forget it. Unless he's a master, he's got nothing. And again, if he's a master, he won't brag. because he'll feel his connection with you. He'll feel that joy that he has, and he'll want you to have it too. Don't we have that experience here? We find some good dosa place where it's extra ghee and half price, and then we have to tell everyone, go to, House of Dosa, you'll love it. We automatically recommend something that we've found that brings joy. And what could bring greater joy than self-realization, one with the cosmic joy? So I thought it might be helpful. I took the Gita reading that is included normally for this week, but instead of reading it from the usual books, I'm going to read it from here along with Swamiji's commentary, because it's very important to make friends with the Gita. Now, what if you have the opposite experience? No, I love the Gita, I've grown up with it, I can recite it backwards in Sanskrit and everything. Wonderful. But the thing is, how does it apply? Because it is so central, it applies in many directions. It helps people understand just how to behave in this life. This is part of what it's for. People say life doesn't come with a manual. It does, actually. And also, why read out of this book? Because Master said millions will find God through his commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita. And in case that didn't sink in, he said, not just thousands, millions. I know, I have seen it. And so, let's get reading. But also, the Gita is essentially a scripture also of yoga. When sometimes people are wondering, what are the ancient texts on yoga? It's easy to jump to the Yoga Sutras. After all, they have the right name. And they're written by Patanjali, who's become world famous, or, famous throughout the galaxy for writing this scripture and so on, and rightly so. And the Yoga Scriptures have everything going for the Yoga Sutras have everything going for them except one thing. They are impossible to understand. Rightly. They're easy to read, they're easy to say. You can say all kinds of things. Yoga is the cessation of the mental modifications of mind stuff. Excellent means nothing. Absolutely nothing. Swamiji would often object to that phrase, mental modifications and mind stuff. It's yoga's chitta vritti nirodha is the Sanskrit, and Master translated it very simply as yoga is the neutralization or the calming of the vortices, which are whirlpools. If you don't like that, just the disturbance of feeling. Yoga is the calming of our disturbed feelings. So already we have a clear guideline. So, if later on today, whoops, feelings are disturbed, time for yoga. Calm those disturbed feelings. In fact, Swamiji wrote in his last book, in his second to last book, the entirety of the spiritual path consists in controlling the emotions, calming the emotions. Calming not by suppression, but by joy, by relaxation, by living without fear. There's that beautiful chant, I think it's of Sri Yukteswar's, that it says, you won't have to fear anything anymore once you find God, basically. So let's go now into the Gita. This is from chapter 1, the first sloka. And, you ready? Because sometimes I say chapter 1, chapter 10, because it's just kind of, okay, here it comes. First of all, I'm going to read it in English for my sake. And, and I have to give a little digression about English and my sake. I had a call yesterday from somebody objecting to the fact that people from Ananda were calling her in Tamil Nadu and they were speaking English. So somehow she got my number, and so she called me to complain to me about this problem. And I was saying, I'm sorry, madam, who are you trying to reach? And she said, sir, I am no English, which she said in English. But, so I didn't quite follow what she was saying, so I said, Orimsha Katringa, and so on, and someone will call you. And so then I had Prasanna call her, asked him to call her, and basically the short of it is that she was upset that people were speaking English to her. So she called me and discovered the source of the problem. And then when she complained to him about it, he said, well, he's not from Tamil Nadu. And she said basically a combination of how is that possible and why, and how could he not speak Tamil? I mean, how could a human being not speak Tamil? We've got oxygen, carbon dioxide, iron in our blood, and Tamil. And so Prasanna was forced to say, basically, could you call up Google Maps and see your location and then expand and see that beyond Tamil Nadu there are other Nadus. There is Telugu Nadu, and there is Hindi Nadu, and there is even English Nadu. And so, anyway, it was a little bit beyond her. But the point of it was that, yes, I am supposed to learn more Tamil. Nevertheless, in English, chapter 10, the Blessed Lord said, O mighty armed Arjuna, hear now my supreme utterance. Speaking for your highest good, I will say more to you who have listened with joy. So you see, remember, hear the words. Don't say, okay, here it comes, I know I'm not going to follow it. So the Blessed Lord says, then Arjuna uvacha, then Krishna uvacha, but all I know is that somebody is uvachaing, but I don't know what they're uvachaing about. He says, because you have listened with joy. Why say that? Just because that tells us Arjuna was smiling? No. When we listen with joy, we draw more from God. We found this was always true. Master even said it of Sri Yukteswar, that any disciple could summon one of Sri Yukteswar's all-night discourses by showing sufficient interest. If you just showed interest, Sri Yukteswar would give everything. If you just kind of didn't, then he wouldn't. In fact, one time Master, while listening to Sri Yukteswar, suddenly Sri Yukteswar stopped and said, you are not here. And Master said, Guruji, what are you saying? I've heard everything you've said, and I can repeat every word you have uttered. And Sri Yukteswar said, nevertheless, you were not with me. Your objection forces me to say that in the back of your mind you were mentally creating 3 institutions. One in a forest, one on a mountaintop, and one by the ocean. And Master was shocked because he barely even realized that he was doing that. But it was true that in the back of his mind he had those sort of visions. In fact, all of those places came to be later on in his life. But so when you listen to God with joy, He gives you more. You see, why? Because He only gives us what we ask for. That's the whole secret of it. If you're in jail and you can't get out, did you try? Yes, I tried. It's locked. I tried. I can't pick the lock. Did you ask the jailer for the key? Well, no. Of course, but why not? Ask God for the key. Can you please let me out? Velila, something or other. Don't even try. But, I want out. Bovanam. Okay. So we have to just ask God. So when we draw it from Him, more comes to us. Okay? So Krishna says, neither the multitude of gods, meaning the angels, nor the great sages in their human state know me in my unmanifested state. I am their source and origin. Whoever realizes me, however, unborn and without any beginning, as well as even now the Lord of creation, has conquered delusion and is sinless, though he inhabit a human body. And this is a natural following continuation of what we had done last 2 weeks about the avatars, who are one with God and yet are in a human body. Swamiji writes, based on Master's interpretation, it may be helpful for people to realize that even Jivan Muktas, indeed even fully liberated masters, accept in their human state some human limitations. This comes up all the time because people would say, if Master was an avatar, why did he do this? Or why did he seem to do that, which may have been a mistake? Or why did he say once, I can't remember? Isn't he one with God? Can't he remember? And all these things. Once Swamiji had that conversation with Master. Master asked him about something that had happened. And Swamiji said, well, but Master, he asked him for details. And Swamiji said, well, but Master, don't you know? I mean, sort of, if you're all-knowing, what do you need to ask me for? You can just look it up, And anyway, Master said, when you are one with God, you are God. Which is a very interesting answer. First of all, it's a bit strong of an answer to say, because he said he was one with God. But he was feeling, Swami perhaps, I don't know, but he was answering Swamiji saying, yes, of course I know. But at another time he said, it's important also for you all to speak to me. It's not sufficient that I just know. It's not like Master is just Google running its own queries on itself. It's that we have to ask. We have to hear the answer. We have to have that conversation. There's more to it, but that's part of it. So, even fully liberated masters may, for example, seem to suffer for others, and even on occasion for themselves. They express hopes, enthusiasms, and disappointments that they don't really feel at their own center. Though completely non-attached, they play the game of life. I used often to observe when my guru expressed perfectly natural human feelings that he always did so in a sattvic manner. His eyes, too, were fathomlessly calm. It was obvious to me that he was inwardly untouched. And he said that was true, that when the last time he saw Master and some coconuts had, he saw Master's last breath, but I mean the last time they were together before that, some coconuts had arrived from Mexico. Someone could get green coconuts from there. And so Master had them and he said, oh, Divine Mother was telling me that these were here, and he was opening them up with such excitement, and then drinking them, the juice, and then he said, and now for the flesh, and cut it in half. But Swamiji saw in all that Master was doing in his eyes that they were completely detached and they were far away. And when Master saw that Swamiji saw this, he became very serious. And he said, I have a big day tomorrow. Wish me luck. And this was March 6th, and March 7th is the day that he left the body. And so even if you didn't catch that in the eyes, you would think, oh, he's just happy for coconuts. And so, but if you looked in the eyes, and this was, I have to say, this was very true of Swami Kriyananda also. You could always see in his eyes, they looked always the same, deep and infinite. And I mean it. I don't just mean that, yes, because, he is our guru, that therefore we sort of say this about him. No, it's true. You could see in all situations, whether he was smiling, laughing, his eyes were just the same. It was a very surprising and inspiring thing to see. And you can see it too on YouTube. There are so many videos of him. So, to be acceptable to human beings, the Master accepts humanity for himself as part of the teachings he was sharing. Meaning Master did, Yogananda. Once, for example, when a disciple tried to call his attention to the higher teachings during a discussion of world events, the Guru responded, well, but now we are speaking in human terms. He acknowledged the human thing as a reality, as opposed to someone saying, if he said, look, there's some problem here with this party or that party, and someone said, yes, but it is all the breath of Maya on the sea of the cosmic. He just said, look, actually we're talking about something, Let's also, because people will try to reject the human reality, saying it's all God. And that's fine if you really believe that. But the fact is, we can't just so easily get over delusion. We can't so easily dismiss our likes and dislikes and desires. And people will often try to just put on white clothes and say, incense please, and then, now I am one with God. And someone says, there's no water. Oh, all is Brahman. Yes, but you're going to be thirsty later, and you're going to ask for your dinner, and you're going to want to take a bath. And so let's get moving. Brahman is also in the well and in the motor, and let's try to get them going. You see, it's called a spiritual bypass. When you jump over the test, to pretend that you've already arrived at the result. You see? I think by the smile and the laughter you are aware of what I'm speaking of. But remember, when we see it in others, let's then see that reflection in ourselves. In what way do we sometimes deny that there is a problem because I am too spiritual to have that kind of problem? Well, let's just be honest with ourselves and accept ourselves. Sometimes people do that because if they feel if I have to accept this problem, it means I'm not spiritual at all. But as Master said to Swamiji, truth is not afraid of questions. So if we really want the truth, we should not be afraid of questions. We should not be afraid to answer questions of ourselves, about ourselves. We should not be afraid to look inside. God accepts us as we are. How do we know? Because there hasn't been a lightning bolt yet down on our heads, and otherwise we would be just a pile of ashes. So as long as that hasn't happened, He's okay with us being the way we are. So the more we can become okay with that, then from there we can grow forward. But if we pretend, then it's more likely that we'll move in circles. Okay? When, during his early years in America, an Indian disciple betrayed him, our guru expressed great sorrow. Yet another disciple, who years later visited India, learned that the master, while still a boy, had predicted this very betrayal. So he knew it was going to happen, and yet he acted so upset when it did happen. We might compare his later grief to someone seeing a movie for the second time. Wanting to enjoy the plot as it unfolds, he deliberately ignores his prior familiarity with it. So, Krishna continues now. Discrimination, wisdom, calm clarity, forgiveness, truthfulness, sense control, inner peace, joy, sorrow, birth, death, fear, courage, harmlessness, equanimity, serenity, self-discipline, charity, fame, notoriety. These states, vastly diverse as they are, derive from my one self. They are modifications of my one essential nature. And Swamiji writes, as in dreams, the thoughts and emotions expressed are experienced as projections of the dreamer's consciousness, so in the cosmic dream, all aspects of it are projections of the divine consciousness. The most significant difference between the divine dream and human dreams is that human dreams may, though they don't necessarily, reveal something about the person projecting them, whereas God's dream reveals nothing of His cosmic nature. And this is an important point. You see, Swamiji just touches on something lightly that we could go on. This could be the whole topic. Sometimes people get very caught up in their dreams. We sometimes get questions. I had a dream of a purple light that came, and then there was also a few uttapams, and then I pet a cat, and I woke up. What it means? And one person has a very good answer for that. Nayaswami Savitri says, the right person to ask what it means is yourself. You see, we can try to understand what symbolism means in dreams and so on. Sure, in fact, Master wrote about it. It's not invalid. And yet, still, we will have certain personal reactions to that. Some people will see a cat and feel great joy because of their connection. Some people will see a cat and will be afraid of it. Some will be allergic, and so they'll always associate it with discomfort. Others never got to have a pet at all, even they would finally, in their dream at least. So you see, it's very subjective what that same image would mean to different people. So we have to look for ourselves. If you want to know what a dream means, look to your feelings. How did you feel in the dream? And this can be very helpful, actually. I notice that that many people, as they progress on the path, they find more of an ability to react in their dream the way they would wish to react in life. Like, for example, all this army comes charging at them and they just say, stop it, because in fact this is my dream and you're not invited, so get out. And the people, and go out. I've had dreams like that, where you just say, I don't feel like having this kind of dream. The other night I was having a dream, and it was annoying. It was harassing. It wasn't this, but it was, because I don't remember, but it was kind of like the car ran out of petrol, and all the cars were honking at me, and I was just sort of stuck in this difficult situation. And I just said, I don't like this dream, and there's no way out of the situation, so I'm just going to wake up. And I woke up. It was sort of like, ha-ha, when you have a horror movie and it's so frightening and you just unplug the thing. Over. And so this is one thing you can start to find out about yourself in dreams, is look to your reaction in the dream. Are you afraid? Are you caught up in it? Are you able? Are you less afraid than you used to be? Are you less caught up in excitement than you used to be? Are you more joyful? Look to see that. It can be helpful because it shows you that your meditation is starting to sink into your subconscious too. So it's starting to clean out that part of yourself too. So they can be helpful, but as he said, they don't necessarily show anything about you. So even if you have a terrible dream and say, oh, what a terrible person I am to have this terrible dream, if nothing else, just look at it as a past life. Who cares? I'm not doing these things now, and so let me just go to meditation. God is beyond all qualifications. The potential manifestations of consciousness itself are infinite in number and express no attachment or desire on the Creator's part. Krishna continues. The 7 great rishis, the primeval 4, the 14 manus are all modifications of my nature, born of my projected thought, and endowed with creative powers like mine. From these progenitors come all the life forms on earth. Swamiji writes, the, quote, modifications of God's nature, though meaningful to people who are steeped in the ancient lore, possess less significance for the modern mind. The important thing is that God, the eternal spirit, does not act directly in producing his cosmic dream, but creates executives, channels of his consciousness, through whom he, in his overarching power and wisdom, manifests and unfolds all later developments. So, God is managing director, but he has executive directors and vice presidents and so on, and they help. So, Krishna says, he who realizes the truth of my prolific manifestations and the creative and dissolving power of my divine yoga is unshakably united to me. And I forgot to mention that. I was saying you would think that the scripture of yoga is the Yoga Sutras because it has the right name. And it is, once you can understand it. Swamiji wrote a book based on Master's commentary called Demystifying Patanjali. And I recommend it obviously for anybody who wants to really understand what Yoga Sutras. And yet, the other major scripture of yoga is this one. How do you know? Because he just said yoga. It has the word yoga constantly throughout it. In fact, what does he say is the point of these teachings once you learn them? Does he say to Arjuna, be thou a yogi? He doesn't say, be thou a Hindu, be thou an Aadhaar card holder, India uber alles. He doesn't say any of that. He says, be thou a yogi. It's true for everybody. Okay? I am the source of everything. From me all creation emerges. Realizing this great truth, the wise, awe-stricken, adore me. Swamiji writes, as opposed to the details that produce the sum total of all knowledge, there is a flow to wisdom, which of its own nature rejects a superfluity of detail. You see, people can get so caught up on details, and often masters will not pay any attention to details, and it can seem at first that they're absent-minded, but they're looking on a deeper level, because as he adds, complete wisdom knows them all. It knows all the details. And so, by the way, if we see masters rejecting details, it doesn't give us cause to. Yes, just like the master, I also reject details. Not if that's our job, you see. In fact, there's clarity. Usually, we're doing that out of a wish to lower our energy or a wish to not raise our energy because it takes more effort to focus on this. But once we learn how to do that in some simple thing, then we find we can do it in all things. And we develop great strength. It's a shortcut. Wisdom's primary focus is on the direction of movement, the direction. What is awe-inspiring about Supreme Truth is not the sheer number of its manifestations, which are indeed beyond numbering, but its cascade of overwhelming bliss. You see, why do people like God? Because when they feel closer to Him, they feel more joy. Why do the wise, seeing God as the source of all things, adore Him? As Krishna says, it's one thing to say, oh look, there's the source of all things. Nice. You know, suppose you look into the center of the galaxy and you see gamma rays and X-rays and cosmic energy pouring from it and say, wow, that somehow sustains this galaxy somehow. I don't quite understand it, but fascinating. Okay, well, Konja Pasiyanaka or something. You see? See how I'm now showing off. I can't help it. No, I'm kidding. I don't even know what I said. But that we just look at these things and just sort of say, oh, is it so? But it doesn't make us adore it. What makes us adore it is because we feel bliss. We feel joy. We feel happy. As one saint put it, speaking to God, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in Thee. It's almost as if the reason why we feel joyful with God is because we're finally home in God. And until then, we're somehow not right. We're somehow uneasy because we are incomplete. You know how sometimes when you get home, you kind of, and you can lock the door and be safe. But it's not always true. Sometimes knock, 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 and yes, or so on, or our home has a problem, or actually we don't feel that great at home. And so this is why we're always seeking that real home. And so that home is in God. And how do you know? Because the closer you get to Him, the more joy you feel. It's just natural. It's the way we are. And this is the point. This was, in fact, Swamiji's objection to some of the commentaries on the Yoga Sutras, because they keep talking about the object contemplated. He said, the object? He said, this is God we're talking about. This is the object which the scriptures describe as rasha or rasa, most relishable. Better than dosa, better than chutney, better than even idli, if possible. Better than human love, better than the temporary joy of some increment, better than the applause of everyone who for today is pleased with you. And even better than your health recovered after a long illness. Better than that is God. And how do you know? Because when you meditate, you feel happier than you used to feel. Ilya? True? That's the thing. It's not that we have to see it and say, oh, Krishna says that the wise adore Him and there's bliss. Okay, good to know. You feel it. Tastes of it. More and more that draw us, that attract us. And that's what makes any of this worthwhile. Sometimes some people will ask, why do you talk so much about Yoganandaji, or why do you talk so much about Swami Kriyananda and so on? For me, not so much why do you talk so much, but what sort of made you love him so much? What made me love him, among many things, was how much joy I felt when I was in his presence. It was very selfish, really. You know, it's not any different, really, than Mysore pak. Why do people like Mysore pak? Because it tastes different from pavakai. And so, even though I like pavakai, but still, you take Mysore pak, I love Mysore pak. Why? Because of how sick it makes me? No, because of the joy that it brings. And so that's what we felt with Swamiji, even better than Mysore-Pak. There was this joy. There was just this great power, this great upliftment. And it was not like anything I have experienced. It wasn't just, I like this person and seeing them makes me happy. It was deeper than that. And so I wasn't even aware of it in the beginning. And I have felt it since. I don't mean to say it was just in his physical presence. It can even be with a thought, and so on. But this is something we can all develop, whether we were in Swami Kriyananda's physical presence or Master's physical presence, which none of us were. Still, it can be brought because they're just as much here now as they are anywhere. And especially if we call them. So keep this in mind, that it's bliss we are seeking. That's why it's strange sometimes when people will say, God is Sat-Chit Anandam. And it's like, I'm looking at your face and I'm not seeing any Anandam. It's Ananda, it's joy, bliss. It's a happy thing. So we don't have to just about it. Their thoughts engrossed in me, Krishna says, their being surrendered to me, enlightening one another and conversing of me, they are ever contented and filled with joy. So he is speaking of the saints, but he is also speaking of the saints in the making. You see? We always want to bring these things and relate them to our life. It's not like, if ever I walked by the Saints Club and the door was partially open and I could peek in, I would see them conversing and about God. Isn't that what we talk about too? Ourselves? Ordinary human beings, Swamiji writes, accustomed to the pleasure of conversing together, of gossiping and retelling the latest news coupled with their opinions and reaction. I mean, this is very true. Someone, when she came on the path, she said that I talk about different things now that I'm here on the spiritual path. Before, we would basically be hearing each other and say, Abdiya, very bad. That this one did this horrible thing, and that one's neighbor did some horrible thing, and that one's son did, such an even more horrible thing. Abdiya, very bad. People who love all this gossip imagine that in God, all this fascinating variety will be lost. Krishna suggests in this stanza that such is far from the case. Not only is the bliss of Sat-Chit Ananda ever new, as Yogananda declared, but those who know it find, even in conversing together of divine matters, a level of delight which worldly people never know. I saw a gathering once of Ananda devotees who were making an altar and decorating something very beautifully. And somebody came in who was also an Ananda devotee, but just sort of in a grouchy mood, which seemed to have been happening for some years. And the person kind of came in and was just kind of tired. And I said, don't you want to help? And I already helped. It's okay, but it's not done yet, and everybody was so happy. And I just sort of had this imagination. It was not real, but I imagined that this person would kind of come up and be like, excuse me, can you believe Modi? And, the people on the altar is just sort of, kind of like, which chant of Master's is your favorite? Which song of Swamiji's do you like the best? Which is your favorite technique of meditation? Which is your favorite energization exercise? Like, that would be the level of the conversation, and the person would just kind of, find nothing to connect with. And yet, when you feel that joy, what is the point in just, talking about nothing? A friend of mine was saying this to me recently, that she was on a trip with all people, let's just say, of other acquaintances, and she just said, she said some were younger than me, most were younger than me, a few were older than me, and they were all complaining about their illness their pains that they have, their daughter doing this, their son not doing that, and this one, by the way, and even about each other probably, just, And she said it was just so tiresome. Because you find, where does it go? It goes nowhere. And when that's all you've tasted, then there is a certain pleasure in it. Otherwise, people wouldn't do it. It's like, how often do you put chili peppers in your eyes? Very rarely, because it doesn't feel good. But this, even though it feels like that to a devotee, but no, why are they doing it? It's like scratching, Swamiji said, a mosquito bite. It's painful, but it also feels good at the same time. And so people just... But when you've healed from the mosquito bites, when you've tasted a greater joy, and then someone says, hey, you want to... It just has no attraction for us. And so that's why you should seek others with a similar perspective, so you can have that joy of conversing with each other, of God. You see? Because it brings such a joy. It's a little bit like the joy we had in childhood when we were carefree, when we didn't have all these worries and things and so on. So you can recapture that by becoming a child again, a child of God. Okay? Does this make sense? People's sheer need for variety indicates the barrenness of their hearts, which drives them to seek anxiously a few raindrops of diversity in hope of somehow slaking their thirst. When two people meet who know God, they may not converse much, but the flow of divine love and bliss between them is completely satisfying to them both. And Swamiji said someone told him that he saw this other disciple was with Master's most advanced disciple, Sister Gyanamata, and Master came into the room, and Sister stood, as she always did whenever she was in his presence. But she didn't look at him. She was looking... Oh, no, Master went over and didn't say anything. And he entered the room and just went over to the window and was looking out the window silently. And this disciple sort of, observed that he was actually smiling, just softly, just a gentle smile. And then the disciple looked at Sister Gyanamata, and she, not looking at Master, was also smiling. And he said, something's going on here that I'm missing out on. They were having a conversation, most likely, or they were just feeling God's bliss together. And I have to say, this is part, not at all anywhere on the same level, but this is part of why so many of us enjoyed being with Swamiji too. As I said, that joy was a two-way thing. It was a silent conversation of hearts. I don't know much more about it. I can just say what I myself experienced and what so many have. But you've experienced that. When you feel that in your heart, it's God's presence in you, enjoying the God's presence in others. It's very strengthening, and it's who we really are. It reminds us that we're not caught up in all these things that seem so real. So seek that. And the more you have it, the more you get attracted, the more you get even addicted to it. And you don't feel like having these other kinds of relating. And you do it. It's not that we just move out of the house and so on and say, once you find God, then come and see me. It's that we still do discharge our duties, but inwardly we are fed from our true source, instead of trying, as he said, to grasp a few raindrops of love, of affection, of kind words, of appreciation, at least, from this desert around us. And finally, Krishna says, to those who are attached only to me and who worship me with love, I impart that discernment of wisdom by which they attain me completely. And the key word here is I impart. It's not those who study and do their homework, they get smart all by themselves. He says, no. That when they make the effort, I give this gift. Out of pure compassion, Krishna continues, that is, out of the selfless gift of love, with no admixture of compulsion, I, the Divine One who dwells in all, set alight in their hearts the blazing lamp of wisdom, which banishes their darkness of ignorance. And Swamiji writes, it is important for the spiritual aspirant to realize that he doesn't earn anything by seeking God. Divine grace is still a gift of compassion, and may be withheld from those who follow the law exactly, but who, perhaps out of dryness of heart, fail to win his love. God may, on the other hand, reward with the highest wisdom those who, in their surrender of perfect devotion, only love him. Meaning they don't follow all other rules. They just love. Remember this, that Krishna asked Draupadi, why don't you learn yoga like all your husbands? She said, Lord, I want to, but I can't stop thinking of you long enough to try. And Krishna smiled, which sometimes people use this as an excuse for why they too don't learn yoga. I say, okay, very good, but can you not stop thinking of Krishna long enough to try? That's the other part of it. She had already attained yoga. She had already attained union. And revealed also by the fact that Krishna smiled. However, we should keep in mind that, as Jesus said, to he who loves much, much is forgiven. And what do we need to be forgiven of? In the yoga context, the only thing we need to be sort of cleared away from is our past karma. We do have the past karma. It's not a bad thing. It's not a sinful thing, but it is baggage. And so the debts can be just written off. Wouldn't that be nice? And what is the secret to that? It's love. If you love much, much is forgiven. There is a story which I think most of you know, so I'll just say the short version of it. But it was when Narada was taking an inventory of all the great saints on earth, and he was cataloging them and filling them in his iPad and so on. And then when he was he was coming to the beam-up point where Vishnu was going to bring him back. And on the way there, he saw this great ascetic who had for 80 years been fasting and never sleeping and doing all these austerities. And he said, wow, this is really quite a serious devotee. I guess I am telling the whole story. And so he wrote down his, Berna, and he wrote down his name. And then he said, I'm going now to God and I'll include you in my report. And so the man said, tell God it's high time he came to me. I've been doing all these things for 80 years. And so then, just as he was about to beam up, he saw, he was disturbed because there was a young man nearby who was drunk and was trying to build a fence, while drunk. And the first thing he had to do was put a wooden post in a hole to get the first thing of the fence going. And he couldn't even get that right. He just kept missing the hole or falling and so on. And so Narada, had one space left in his iPad, otherwise he wouldn't even have bothered. But he sort of said, Unberna, and so then he was asking, and he said, what is this about? Are you soliciting? Are you selling something? He said, no, I'm going up to God, and I'm telling about everybody I came across, and I'm going to tell him about you too. And the man said, if you're going to see God, tell him that it's high time he came to me. And so he thought, are you sort of, you seem to already be in a little bit of ecstasy of your own right now. And how is God going to be impressed with with a drunk? So when Narada got back and he gave, Vishnu the whole report and so on, I don't know if he downloaded it or if, how Vishnu just got it and so on, especially if he's all-knowing. What does he need this for? But never mind. So he then came to the very end of the list and he said, oh, by the way, I came across this great ascetic who went through all these disciplines and practices. And Swamiji, in telling the story, said, and Vishnu searched his all-knowing consciousness and said, I don't know who you're talking about. But he said, what do you mean, Lord? Maybe you're mixing him up with somebody? He's done all of these amazing things for you. And God said, no, I don't know him. And then he said, was there anyone else? And Narada said, well, I wasn't even going to mention it, but there was this young man, and instantly Vishnu said, oh yes, the one making the fence, yeah, while drunk. And Narada said, Lord, what is this? You don't know the guy following all the rules that are really hard to do. And then the guy who's drunk, you know him? I mean, this isn't even fair. And don't worry, the moral of the story is not what you think it is. So Vishnu says, here's how you can tell them apart. You go to them and tell them that I'm about to come to them, and I will as soon as I finish passing elephants through the eye of a needle. And Narada, looked around and, wondered if, the elephant's coming soon, or, but anyway, he went back as ordered, back to the beam down point, and then he saw the first one, and he said to the ascetic, he said, what news? That old saint or saintly or somebody, whatever, man said to him, what news from God? And he said, he's just about to come, but he's busy passing elephants through the eye of a needle. And this man said, what? He said, passing elephants through the eye of a needle? Who's heard of such a ridiculous thing? What a waste of time the spiritual path is. Goodbye, God, and all your crazy crowd. I'm done. I've spent all my life for nothing and having no pleasure. I'm going to just, whatever energy and life I have left, I'm going to live it up, because this has all just been a waste. And so then Narada found the other man, and as soon as the young man saw him, he dropped what he was doing and he ran to him. And he said, what news from God? And he had a devotion that Narada hadn't glimpsed before. He hadn't seen. And Narada said, well, he is going to come to us, but he's busy passing elephants through the eye of a needle. And the man said, well, God who can create this world and all these things can certainly pass elephants through the eye of a needle. It means he must be on his way. And he said, dance with me. And they started dancing together, and then in their midst was the Lord. So you see, to he who loves much, love is everything. And following the rules rigidly and being very impressive, if it's not matched with love in the heart, is something, but it's not much. This is why when somebody asked Master a very intellectual question, Master just said, love God. And the man said, And he went to the next question, probably about the mental modifications of mind stuff and so on. And Master said, love God. And the man thought, okay, maybe I'll try question number 3, which probably was, please define awareness. And then Master just said, because it's the one thing you can't define, and Master said, love God, and stood up and walked out. And the man never understood. He even wrote later about how even self-realized masters have problems. You see, Master was impatient with this kind of thing. He was trying to awaken the man. And someone once asked Swamiji a very complex question. I think it had to do with time. He had written it out. Something about if everything is happening at the same time, then why is it that he kind of sort of came up with some paradoxical question, and then the question ended, please don't answer, love God. And Swamiji said, I'm sorry, but there just isn't any other answer. Who cares about all of these things? Love God, and then you will know all of these things. The Swamiji's last sentence of this is, through the intervention of the Sat Guru alone do such blessings come. God bless you.